Marshall James Anderson. Once a lawman, always a lawman. Boys, did I tell you how much I hate lawmen?
Howdy, I'm Sam, and welcome to Late to the Party, a new look at old media. Red Dead Redemption 2 is undoubtedly one of the most groundbreaking gaming experiences in modern culture. With its immersive storytelling, memorable characters, and breathtaking environments, it has absolutely solidified its place within video game history. But what came before it? What led to the scale of Redemption 2? What other games inspired this monumental undertaking? This apex of the genre? Quite a many things, as a matter of fact. But before we get into the meat of this episode, please do hit that like button and consider subscribing. It really helps me out and gets me that much closer to not having to work a real job. Thanks guys, it's appreciated. Anywho, while there are many well-made and thorough videos here on YouTube that cover the history leading up to RDR2, one of which even partially inspired this series as a whole, I always find one game largely overlooked, a Western title that, while influential, never seems to be lumped into the same sentences as Red Dead, Gun, or even Call of Juarez, despite how influential I personally saw it as. No, in this episode, I want to take you all the way back to 1997, when first-person shooters were really starting to get off the ground. And with the recent revitalization of the so-called boomer shooter, yes, I'm old, I figured it would be a good time as any to talk about this largely forgotten Western that happened to be one of the very first games I ever remember playing. I speak, of course, of the classic Outlaws. Published by legendary game studio LucasArts, Outlaws served as a bit of an outlier from its competition. Whereas other popular first-person shooters at the time were more focused on science fiction and bombastic environments, Outlaws was more grounded, taking place sometime in the age of the American Old West, with weapons, settings, characters, and even all the items appropriately fitting into the time period.
You're outnumbered!
Outlaws puts you into the boots of retired U.S. Marshal James Anderson, who can be best physically described as Abe Lincoln with Jack Skellington's build. After making an all-day ride to the general store, this was the Old West after all, he returns to find his home burning down, with his daughter missing and his wife fading away.
Anna!
As it turns out, right after he left, a duo of hired muscle made one last attempt to buy out Anderson's land in order to make way for a new railroad that their boss was trying to make a fortune off of.
Where now there are struggling farms, I see a gleaming city rising from the parched plains. A city that has my name on it.
In their boss's words, the pair was only supposed to enlighten the Andersons into selling.
Oh, I always enlighten. And then I kill.
Anderson briefly grieves his wife and proceeds to pick up the only thing that seemingly survived the fire, his big iron. Hell-bent on saving his daughter and getting revenge on the group responsible for all this mayhem, he makes his way to the expecting town of Sanctuary. The game itself is very straightforward. Make your way through each level, mowing down any and all outlaws you see using a mixture of period-appropriate weapons. Outlaws actually takes a lot of the tropes from other first-person shooters at the time. Well-designed levels lead to many hidden areas scattered throughout. Health items such as water canteens and elixir, apparently, keep the marshal on his feet and cooking. New, more powerful weapons like the sawn-off or the ever-trusty throwing knife give him a fighting chance. While the story itself can be chopped up into a simple revenge rescue mission, the actual way it's told to the player really stands out. Unlike other first-person shooters up to this point, Outlaws interconnects every level with these hand-drawn cutscenes, complete with full voiceover from a surprisingly star-studded cast.
How do I know you're telling the truth?
The Marshal is voiced by Jeff Osterhage, himself a longtime veteran of Western TV and films, while the character of Dr. Death is voiced by John Delancey, who has since been in a number of recognizable roles, notably Donald on Breaking Bad.
Oh, well, I guess things just got a little out of hand. Oops.
While most games of this time were severely limited on how they actually presented their stories, with many opting to have a quick text-based synopsis either in-game or in the instruction manual, Outlaws took this approach and really made it its own. The exaggerated facial animations and surprisingly tame use of blood lended itself to the style, even considering sometimes the blend of 2D hand-drawn animation and certain 3D rendered objects veered into somewhat uncanny valley. Despite being retired, the grizzled Anderson is a force to be reckoned with, and his speed, accuracy, and brutality are all on display here, showing his ability to bring Old West justice to his frontier. Anderson makes his way through each level, laying down lead and hunting down each outlaw lieutenant, interrogating them to get his next clue forward. Each underling is a bit of a caricature unto themselves, but that doesn't make them any less memorable or charming.
Now I got a crazed father after me and his little brat out back. Now you got me into this mess. You get me out of it.
Well, Mr. Graham, all my medical training says that you can't reason with a crazy man.
So kill him!
That is music to my ears. Consider it done.
The Marshal makes his way through a variety of stereotypical Old West locations, such as abandoned towns filled with criminals, mine shafts, a train, and even a sawmill. These levels all have a unique characteristic, keeping the gameplay fresh for the player and avoiding them expecting the same thing twice. All of them are enjoyable to play and require no explanation. Except for one of them. There is one level that will forever be engraved into the recesses of my mind. That being the Canyon level. I don't know if it was the Compaq 98 computer I originally played this on, or if it happened to be a glitch in the copy my family owned, but it always seemed to be impossible to complete this level when I was a kid. For one reason or another, Anderson would always glitch through the map and end up in some weird infinity loop portion of it. As children, my sister and I just ended up using a cheat code to skip this level and go straight to the next one instead. But as an adult picking it up years later, I was determined. After re-downloading it and playing to that level, and some searching around, I found that there is one small alcove that you're supposed to take a leap of faith into and let the force of the wind take you to the next area. There is no indication for this. The hella old computer I originally played this on never made any sound cues, and the mechanic is never used again at any point in the game. For the longest time, this alcove looked like any other equally identifiable death pit scattered throughout this beast of a level. When I discovered it, I had to immediately text my sister telling her how I beat this infamous canyon level. This level took me 15 years to finish.
You should have stuck to farming!
Aside from that, the rest of the game plays out very similarly. Anderson continues his crusade of vengeance while trying desperately to find out where his daughter's been taken to. While the years in his profession have definitely aged him greatly, there's a reason that all these criminals know who he is. Marshal James Anderson is a very scary man.
Too bad. I was hoping we could talk.
Finally, after shooting his way through every renegade in the West, the Marshal arrives where his daughter is being held. The big man's front door, Big Rock Ranch.
You're outnumbered!
Swiftly maneuvering through this final firefight will test all the player's skills, but serves as a satisfying final challenge in the last action-packed stretch of this game.
Sarah.
Daddy!
After making his way all the way here, attaining his revenge, Anderson takes his daughter Sarah and, in classic Western fashion, rides off into the sunset. In addition to the classic Western story mode, a separate game mode was also implemented. Dubbed historical missions, they serve to showcase a prequel of sorts to the main game, following Anderson's rise throughout the ranks of a lawman and ultimately earning his way up to the rank of marshal he becomes known for. These missions include a new hub area for Anderson to mess around with between missions. It's supposed to serve as more of his field office, where he can walk around, practice his shooting, and check out all the wanted posters for their corresponding missions. While not overly exciting, it did give a bit of breathing room between contracts and even allowed you to view your collection of criminals you have bested. Depending on your approach in each mission, either you captured your outlaw, and they'll stare at you menacingly from behind their jail cell, or if you decide to go in with a more lethal intention, you'll have their nice, highly pixelated corpse to admire instead. Neat. But despite all my praise and good memories of Outlaws, the fact remains that, unlike other Western games, it's often overlooked in favor of the aforementioned Red Dead, Call of Juarez, or even Gun for that case. But why is that? Going by the standards of the time, it was actually pretty groundbreaking in certain aspects. The way it told its story in these animations was pretty unique for the time, as many other first-person games such as Duke Nukem 3D told their stories in more text box explanations and let the action speak for itself. Having a popular voice cast at this point was almost unheard of as well, as voice acting in general was just getting its feet off the ground in the industry at the time.
Right, but you never shot an innocent man.
I never met an innocent man.
There are even subtle things Outlaws did that you may not have known about either. While it did exist in arcades, Outlaws was one of the first, if not the first games, to have a detachable rifle zoom. It was one of the first games I remember also having a stamina meter. It never really came into play all that much, as Anderson could fly across the map at lightning speeds, but the idea was there. Not only that, but the game disc actually doubled as an album. If you put the disc into a CD player, you could listen to the game's spaghetti western soundtrack. It was a pretty cool addition and sort of a rare thing at the time. By all accounts, Outlaws was well received. John Romero, one of the creators of Doom and by all accounts one of the godfathers of the modern first-person shooter, has even cited this as one of his favorite games of all time. So why was it so overlooked? Why, with the power of LucasArts behind it, was it largely forgotten? If I had to guess the reason it was so overshadowed, it would be because of the unintentional timing. Outlaws was released at the tail end of a decade which would see monumental advances in gaming as a whole. Being released in March of '97, it was sandwiched between games such as the iconic Duke 3D in '96 and the graphical powerhouse that was the original Unreal in '98. It had some competition not only with other game studios, but with the quickly advancing way the public perceived video games as a whole. Quake 2, with its vastly superior graphics, was released by id Software only 8 months later, and the original Half-Life, another genre-defining game, only a year after that. New game engines were being created, and better hardware was making PC gaming more widely available to more and more people. LucasArts themselves would release The Curse of Monkey Island in October of 1997, the long-awaited third entry in their widely popular Monkey Island series, perhaps unintentionally taking even more attention away from Outlaws. Despite it being well praised for its gameplay, soundtrack, and overall thematics, it just couldn't compare to the titans of the time or the continuous forward progress of video game development. Outlaws did, however, have a solid cult following for years. Supposedly, its online mode had a solid fan base for quite some time, and fan-made maps were being published as late as 2022, a full 25 years after its original release, a testament to the enjoyment of this game. In recent years, a handful of games from this era have been remade or remastered for a more modern audience. Another LucasArts project, Star Wars Dark Forces, originally published in March of '95, was remastered by Night Dive Studios earlier this year to pretty positive acclaim. The consensus was that the gameplay and graphics were updated just enough that the spirit of the original was still there, while adding just enough of a modern flair to play a hell of a lot smoother. This was achieved in large part to Night Dive Studios managing to obtain Dark Forces' original source code from way back when. I bring this up because, as it turns out, Outlaws was the only other game that used Dark Force's game engine, the then advanced Jedi engine. With LucasArts no longer existing as it once was, I would love to see Night Dive Studios, now made famous by their own work with remasters, show us their take on Outlaws just to see if they could bring back that similar nostalgic flair to this often forgotten classic. That may just be my wishful thinking, but hey, a Sam can dream.
Where are you, Marshal?
Outlaws, as a Western video game, while rarely said in the same sentence as Gun or Red Dead, still deserves to be remembered for what it was. Despite it not being as technically on par with other games of its time, its art style, tight action, and soundtrack really made it stand out. Even the small, unnoticed features, such as an early example of a reload mechanic and incorporating multiple level buildings, were also incredibly unique for this time and would help inspire future game mechanics that would become staples in modern times. Outlaws deserves its place in the sun.
You afraid of dying, kid? Keep that fear.
Outlaws, along with its handful of missions expansion pack, can be purchased for about $6 on Steam or GOG.com, and at the time of writing this, I've seen it as low as $2. I spent more on my caffeine disguised as coffee this morning, and trust me when I say it's worth it just for the sense of nostalgia alone.
That'll be $4, Marshal.
Hey, Doodle Sammy here. If you've made it this far, I just want to say thank you for watching. If you like my take on things, consider subscribing to my channel and liking this video to help keep this party going. You can also go watch some of my other videos, like this one on Max Payne and the impact of good character development, or this one on how the beginner's guide is an example of art in video games. Either way, I appreciate it. Comment down below on what you'd like to see me take a look at next, tell me your thoughts on Outlaws, or just stop by to say hi. I'd love it regardless. And remember, if you're late to the party, it's still going on. So you might as well enjoy yourself. I'll see you next time.